How many times I got to tell you? Ford got the phone call from Trump, said, I'm going to slap tariffs on your ass. You better stay here. And they said, you know what, we're going to stay here. Apple's saying, you know what, China's collapsing. We think we'll move back to the United States. All because we got somebody in there who's not out to get the country. And now Senator Sessions is going to be put in as AG. You know what that signals? Indictments. A lot of good stuff happening. And it's not vindictive. I just laugh because that witch looked like death warmed over 2 days ago when she finally popped back up whatever subterranean gremlin pit she's in. And it is an exciting time. They're tripling down, though, with race war crap. The mayor's put out that whiteness, whiteness, whites are bad. That's the mayor. I mean, this is just an insane asylum level with a white guy, but of German/Italian ancestry saying that with his weird little psycho controller minions. The good news is the, quote, minorities know they're the majority, and they want prosperity, too. So it is just incredible what's happening. Meanwhile, they're panicking. The globalism's in trouble. The EU's collapsing. World government's in trouble. But the New York Times comes out and says, I'm insane. Globalism doesn't exist. Talk about gaslighting. We got a former psychological warfare head of the State Department. Maybe he can tell us about gaslighting. Or maybe it's not gaslighting. Maybe they're just mentally ill and still delusional. Dr. Steve Pieczenik joins us at the bottom of the hour. Then your phone calls. What do you think of the election? Where all this is going? I'm certainly going to try to kill Trump. 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. So, best-selling author, wrote books with Tom Clancy, produced films, involved in all sorts of clandestine activities. Very interesting guy who actually was out there in the, in the fields, in the streets, not just as an analyst, breaking down what's happening. And boy, Hillary tried to steal 5 states. She did steal 5 states. She still lost. But they were confident. They printed up, Newsweek that she was Madam President. I think we've reached the tipping point. We're not out of the woods yet, but maybe I'm wrong. Dr. Steve Pieczenik, what do you think of StevePieczenik.com?
Alex, I want to congratulate you for getting on the front page of the Washington Post. I think that's indicative of the fact that Jeff Bezos and the entire liberal community, which was controlling and controlled by the Clintons and the corporations, is now disintegrating. What's happened is it's really an American revolution in a very unique way. And Roger Stone was correct when he said you were the cutting edge in terms of the words you spoke, the fact that you stood there and continuously hammered at the issues that we were concerned about, the false flags, the 9/11, the Sandy Hook. And they praised you by saying you're a conspiracist, you're a truther, and that is the new language of our revolution. In other words, to be called a truther, to be called a conspiracist means a lot to us. If we're all truthers and we say that Obama was lying, Obama created false flags, Obama celebrated the fact that he killed Osama bin Laden when Osama bin Laden has been dead, then what's happened in our revolution is that we're basically stating the truth and we went against the system. The system has now been completely turned upside down. Never in our history have we had a multi-billionaire who's made his own business, never had to go out and ask for help from others other than his own family, has been bankrupt in his companies, which is standard for business in the real estate industry. Let me tell you, it's standard. And at the same time, went around 7 times a day, 8 times a day on his own plane, on his own expense account, and basically mustered the wrath of the American people to get elected into the presidency. I welcome him. I wish him the best of luck, and I think he's chosen well. Jared Kushner, his quiet advisor, I think is quite brilliant. I think Bannon, as a chief of staff, was a very good choice. And I think the notion that he was anti-Semitic is absolutely absurd. I mean, Bannon...
Well, they don't even say where it comes from. He's not even anti-Israel in any way. They just make this crap up.
Well, but Alex, you got to look at, the press doesn't even look at the basic history. Bannon was an executive in investment banking in mergers and acquisition. Now, I've been in that position in another firm, Kidder. But to be in Goldman Sachs and to be anti-Semitic, that's just not possible. Then he went into the movie business and became an executive producer and a producer of a lot of films, again, in an industry that was predominantly Jewish. Then he works with Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, who basically are Orthodox Jews. So the notion that he is both an anti-Semite, a racist, and it's just absolute nonsense. So what you see basically is the propaganda machine from the left or wherever the paper's coming from has never done due diligence. They never did due diligence.
They just spew crap. I mean, what they do is, it's like when I said, a Jewish mafia doesn't run things. I don't believe that. but the Emanuels are a mafia, just like there's Italian mafia. Then they turned that into anti-Semitism. In your view, let me ask you this. What do you think of the Emanuels? I mean, look at what they've done in Chicago.
One of them, and he happens to be my agent. He's not a very effective agent. He took over the William Morris agency, with which I've worked with for 30 years. He's arrogant, self-serving, totally, I think he's a bore. I mean, I'm no longer with that agency, but...
Sure, that's my point, is I was saying they're not running anything. I was saying specifically, though, they act like gangsters.
It's anti-Semitic to say that somebody who served in the IDF and has not served in the United States Army happens to be of dual loyalty. And I've said before, I do not approve of American Jews having two passports. You either have one American passport or one Israeli passport. You cannot have two. If you have an Israeli passport, then go to Israel, serve Israel, but don't come and use our country. Bibi had two passports. He took advantage of the education we gave him here all the way through MIT. Then he came back and had the insolence to insult us, to demand things from us. Israel has no right to demand anything from us. It may be our ally, but it's not our best ally. There are many other countries who've been close to us. Israel has been a little child who has to be spanked repeatedly and has to grow up.
Well, I didn't mean to go off on all Israel, Jack. I'm just saying they spew this racism crap when it's not even there, and I think it doesn't work anymore. What do you expect them to strike back with? Because they seem to have only increased their lies. They don't seem to have learned from this. Do you think that's an accurate statement?
That's correct. I think what's happening is, in a revolution, when you're stuck doing the same thing again and again, as Einstein would say, and it's not effective, it becomes stupid. One of the things that I said a long time ago about Hillary was she was not as bright as everybody thought. I don't mean in terms of just being able to spout out policy. She never was able to be creative, initiate anything on her own, and think out of the box or strategic. When she did, and the Democrats did, we had Libya, we had Iraq, we had Syria. So what you have is a lack of sophisticated intelligence on the liberal side. What you have is constant palaver of the same type. At this point, they're totally shocked. Everything you said about the liberals, I have encountered in my own area. I couldn't believe that the people wouldn't talk to me. People were afraid. They were scared that they would be raped, pillaged, and this would be a Bolshevik or Stalinist takeover. I said, no, this is a revolution, but it's a revolution that was done very peacefully through the internet, using many of our own people within the government, and it was done to take out corruption. Now, Trump and his family represented the voice of America and the energy of America. When did we ever have an entrepreneur like Trump who came forth, dedicated his whole life and mission, and said, I don't want your salary, I don't want your pension, I don't even want your health care. That's what the citizen warrior is all about. And he is going to appoint people who are along those lines. Jeff Sessions, I don't know him. I have a lot of respect for him, but this is a man who's been in the law, steeped in the law, for God, how many, 3-4 decades?
40 years.
That's exactly right. And he worked all the way up from his own county, Senate, and came to the national government. This is not somebody who on a whim came in there. This is not a Loretta Lynch who works at Hogan and Hartson. This is not a James Comey who also worked at Hogan and Hartson. This is a gentleman who represents the South. Then we have Pence, the vice president, representing Indiana. Then we have Mike Pompeo from Kansas. Is America beginning to understand that Trump understands what our country's about?
Well, let's stop right there. I'm going to skip this break so we have more time. You've been saying for 5-6 years there'll be a de-evolution, that Europe will break up. You predicted the Brexit here, and you predicted that Trump, notice the South voted for him, understands where America's left. Not bashing the North. It's just been taken over by corruption. We have to grow it back in the South, the Midwest, then bring the freedom back to the East and West Coast. And you've been predicting this would happen. I know the intelligence community's looking at this as well, so let's talk about this.
Well, for a long time, as we were talking about globalism, the president talked about interrelationships. I was talking about devolution of power because the very structure of interrelationship was asymmetric. And it was an example where if you had the EU and the EU had one printing press for 26 or 30 countries, it would not work. England understood this. England understood that the sterling, the pound, could never be attached to the EU because the EU wasn't determined by France or Germany. It was determined by a bureaucratic entity in Brussels, which was totally ineffective, had thousands of...
Which has socialist ideology, but is robber baron at the same time. And so, again, we're seeing the global government project fail, aren't we?
It totally is failing because England is breaking out. Spain will
How did you know 6 years ago, it was about 6 years ago on the show, that it would fail? I mean, I wanted to believe you then, but I didn't see the evidence.
Well, because what I look at is the initial structures of institutions and where they are fragile. And when I began to see, when I was in France, I grew up in France, part of my life. When I was in France in the 80s and the Maastricht Agreement was made, I understood very quickly that if you're going to change French francs or German Deutschmarks for the euro, you already failed. Why? Because Germany was so powerful that the Deutschmark was in fact determining the outcome of the entire trade organization in Europe. And I don't think Obama understood this. Bush Jr. never understood it. Our intelligence community could understand part of it, but they couldn't understand the speed at which we had devolution of power. The same thing in Washington. Even though Trump has come to Washington, he's really staying in his own place, and that makes sense.
By the way, I predicted, he didn't tell me this, I predicted he'd stay at Trump Tower at the time just to have a break with the whole system.
That's correct. And he has broken with the entire system. When everybody said, as if it was a joke, that he was Twittering, no, he explained it very well. In the 21st century, if you do not use Twitter, you failed.
Well, he's not dumb. They're trying to take his best weapon away from him. Well, he has his enemy, Leslie Stahl, in front of him saying, please give up your direct communication with the people. Please let us be your intermediary so we can betray you.
Well, in a way, Alex, with all due respect, I don't see them as enemies because they're not that strong. They're not that formidable. When they see you, Alex Jones, as an enemy, that's formidable. I mean, what you have done over 14 years makes it formidable. And remember, it was a voice, and it was the internet that you used and created. And you were able to syndicate that show.
Oh, I hear you. Well, listen, I don't talk about me all day, but what do you make of 126 on the web now, total site, 5 billion views on YouTube? I mean, do you think they figured out they're getting their ass kicked yet?
They don't want to, you got to understand, when it hurts, they don't want to admit it. There's a dynamic called denial, and it's not a river in Egypt. They want to deny what happened to them. How can you explain, if you're Hillary and Bill Clinton or Chelsea, how you spend $1 billion?
That was my next question. She really thought she would win. We confirmed with our sources. She threw fits, attacked people, had to be sedated.
Correct.
So how was she so delusional when she was paying for fake polls, we knew it, to still think she would win?
Well, when you live in a bubble, and this is what we were talking about for decades, you and I, she lived in a bubble where she never had to do anything on her own, never drove her car, never had to go see a doctor who was a real doctor who could diagnose a Parkinsonism. And she was always protected by the Secret Service. But I want to thank certain members of the Secret Service who revealed to us that she had these diseases. Even if she got into the White House, which I didn't think she would make, she could never remain as president of the United States. It just wouldn't happen. I can't go into the reasons why, but she understood it. Unfortunately, Bill Clinton and the Democrats never understood what I was saying months before and almost a year before there. Do not run. It wasn't an issue of my threatening them. It was a warning to them. You cannot run. You are not viable as an entity. I don't know who was going to run against her at that time, but we knew very well within the system she could not be accepted within our system.
Sure, so it shows how disconnected from reality they are, and so is the cloistered corporate press. So what happens to the corporate press? Do they kind of like blow in the wind like a facade, or they fully collapse?
They're disintegrating. Alex, what's happening is, where you're growing, with all due respect, they're basically having a cash flow problems. Even the New York Times had a little article 3 or 4 days ago, a small article saying how their cash flows have diminished because none of the advertisers are going to go to the New York Times.
But it's down 90. Listen, how do they make $800 million a year and then we're bigger than them, literally on online? Again, it's all delusional, and people finally see the emperor has no clothes. 97.5% reduction in their profits third quarter. They are in free fall.
Well, they're basically bankrupt. What you have here is you have an entity which is basically bankrupt, but they don't want to declare the bankruptcy. You have a Mexican drug lord that's been funding them on the cash flows. You don't need reporters anymore. You don't need an editor. All of that is nonsense. What has happened, thanks to InfoWars and Breitbart and others, and what we've done, it was to take away the newspapers, to take away their content, and basically realign it with the 21st century. What do I mean by that? The internet and social media was so powerful that you knew how to use it, Breitbart knew how to use it, Bannon knew how to use it, and most importantly, Trump knew how to use it. He was brilliant. He absolutely understood the power of the social media and the Twitter. Now, I studied that in 1973 at MIT when I was taught by DARPA, the internet and social media. You and I have talked about it, where your father was involved in that. But in 1973, before Zuckerberg or Gates came out and self-aggrandized themselves, we were already talking about the impact of the social media on the world. And that was funded by DARPA and the CIA in its heyday. Now you see 50 years later, Trump literally using it. And the Democrats had no idea. They didn't even use it at all. And what did they do? They went exactly the old road. Not the road least
and they're
traveled.
still going the old road. I don't understand it. I mean,
Because they're ignorant. They were ignorant, self-delusional, and arrogant. When you have that tripad and you have that triad, it's a very deadly combination. It's basically self-destructive. You and I have talked about that. You and I have never been self-destructive. We've always fought. We got hit. We weren't always right, but we kept on coming back. Hillary was totally self-delusional, and her cult, it was really a cult group. I've never seen anything like this.
It was a cult.
It was a cult. It wasn't a movement. It wasn't a liberal movement. It wasn't a movement that had creativity. The closest person to that creativity was the person I happened to have heard a year ago in Warner, New Hampshire. That was Bernie Sanders, who could articulate exactly what the millennials were concerned about. He articulated a formula that made sense. Trump understood that. I understood that. You understood it. I wrote a blog a year ago saying that the normal opponent to Trump would have been Bernie Sanders, not Hillary Clinton.
Sure, so they screwed up by doing that and expanding on that. I mean, he was getting 10 to 1, 15 to 1, by the end 20 to 1 likes and traffic on Facebook and Twitter. That's always for any marketer, and they have these big algorithms. Total proof. That's why they were panicking, but at the same time still believing they could win because they were putting out fake polls. But people didn't buy the polls, so they didn't go get on the bandwagon for Hillary. That's where they lost it. The fake polls.
Also because Hillary didn't want to hear anything that she didn't want to hear. Alex, you and I understand that we open up and we listen to different things.
Sure.
As you just mentioned, when I talked about devolution of power and it was seemed out of style at 5-6 years ago, I wasn't blowing smoke in the wind. At this time, we don't have to be self-aggrandizing. We simply say the system has changed. We've gone from paper to the internet. We've gone from numbers to binary.
And the old establishment hadn't figured that out yet.
No, the intelligence community had, but what happened was she had seconded guys like Michael Hayden and others who were sycophants. We, in turn, went back to our own people at a lower level and said, look, we've got a problem. She had a civilian coup. Now, you have to understand what that really meant for my own people being military intelligence, civilian intelligence, and all across the board. They understood right away when Hillary and Bill had co-opted Comey, Loretta Lynch, the FBI, the CIA.
She was setting up something really dangerous. She had to be dealt with.
There was no question. And the minute that occurred, and I got to go ahead, that meant we ran a counter coup, as you know better than anybody else. We ran it through Julian Assange. And I've got to say, Julian Assange should be honorary citizenship to America. He really has helped us out.
How can Trump, I get 3 years ago say it's a traitor, I get on his face, Snowden. How could he not pardon Snowden or give Assange asylum here when these are the guys that got him elected?
Snowden is a separate issue. I have to differ with that. Snowden was part of the CIA. He was part of the NSA. Snowden had a top secret clearance and then special access program. It's a very sensitive issue. When you are part of an organization like Daniel Ellsberg and you suddenly become what they call a whistleblower, I'm very, very mistrustful of who you are and who you represent.
You think it might be a double or triple agent?
Snowden doesn't just represent who he is. He doesn't represent the Russians.
Do you think Trump's right saying go after him?
Yeah, I would say yes.
But Assange is good.
I would bring him through a process that's civil. He should have a defense lawyer, the best that money can buy, Hogan and Hartson or William and Conley. I'm sure there are enough lawyers in the Senate who can recommend that. And he should be tried and see what
happens. But as for Assange, he should be given an award. All right,
yes.
Folks can find your book, Stephen Shinnick Talks, at StephenShinnick.com. Always interesting.
Thank you and your audience, Alex. We couldn't have done it without
They're the ones. It's incredible, and we're still not out of the woods yet, but I tell you, we're in the fight, and that's most of the battle. Thank you, Doc. We'll be back with your phone calls and more straight ahead. This is the InfoWars. Stay with us. My fellow InfoWarriors, I am very excited to be able to announce to you the introduction at InfoWarsLife.com of a new way to save time and money when you stock up on InfoWars Life formulations like Survival Shield X2 and Super Male Vitality. Just go to InfoWarsLife.com today, select your favorite product, click on Auto Ship before adding to cart, and choose how often you want us to send you another order. Every time you choose Auto Ship at InfoWarsLife.com, you get 10% off, and you won't have to worry about running out and having to reorder next time. And of course, you can cancel with one click anytime. As you know, I'm all about the idea of a 360 win, and the new auto ship feature at InfoWarsLife.com is a sure win for everybody. A win for liberty, a win for health, and a win when it comes to big savings. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today and save 10% on your next InfoWars Life order by selecting auto ship at checkout. That's InfoWarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139. How many times I got to tell you? Ford got the phone call from Trump, said, I'm going to slap tariffs on your ass. You better stay here. And they said, you know what, we're going to stay here. Apple's saying, you know what, China's collapsing. We think we'll move back to the United States. All because we got somebody in there who's not out to get the country. And now Senator Sessions is going to be put in as AG. You know what that signals? Indictments. A lot of good stuff happening. And it's not vindictive. I just laugh because that witch looked like death warmed over 2 days ago when she finally popped back up whatever subterranean gremlin pit she's in. And it is an exciting time. They're tripling down, though, with race war crap. The mayor has put out that whiteness, whiteness, whites are bad. That's the mayor. I mean, this is just an insane asylum level with a white guy, but of German/Italian ancestry saying that with his weird little psycho controller minions. The good news is the, quote, minorities know they're the majority, and they want prosperity, too. So it is just incredible what's happening. Meanwhile, they're panicking that globalism's in trouble, the EU's collapsing, world government's in trouble. But the New York Times comes out and says, I'm insane, globalism doesn't exist. Talk about gaslighting. We got a former psychological warfare head of the State Department. Maybe he can tell us about gaslighting, or maybe it's not gaslighting. Maybe they're just mentally ill and still delusional. Dr. Steve Pieczenik joins us at the bottom of the hour. Then your phone calls. What do you think of the election? Where all this is going? I'm certainly going to try to kill Trump. 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. So, best-selling author, wrote books with Tom Clancy, produced films, involved in all sorts of clandestine activities. Very interesting guy who actually was out there in the, in the fields, in the streets, not just as an analyst, breaking down what's happening. And boy, Hillary tried to steal 5 states. She did steal 5 states. She still lost. But they were confident. They printed up, Newsweek that she was Madam President. I think we've reached the tipping point. We're not out of the woods yet, but maybe I'm wrong. Dr. Steve Pieczenik, what do you think of StevePieczenik.com?
Alex, I want to congratulate you for getting on the front page of the Washington Post. I think that's indicative of the fact that Jeff Bezos and the entire liberal community, which was controlling and controlled by the Clintons and the corporations, is now disintegrating. What's happened is it's really an American revolution in a very unique way. And Roger Stone was correct when he said you were the cutting edge in terms of the words you spoke, the fact that you stood there and continuously hammered at the issues that we were concerned about, the false flags, the 9/11, the Sandy Hook. And they praised you by saying you're a conspiracist, you're a truther, and that is the new language of our revolution. In other words, to be called a truther and to be called a conspiracist means a lot to us.